the scriptures talk about, all kinds of topics about reality, spiritual things and so on and so forth. I've been covering a few things in the videos, but the divine wishes to basically clarify it at this time in humanity's existence. And there's another thing that is been placed upon my heart and soul, and that's about the ongoing, battle between the sexes that shouldn't exist. I'm just going to speak plainly about it, because divorce, even among so-called Christians, man, is at an all-time high in our nation and worldwide, actually. As you know, if you've listened to my testimony at all, if you've read my affidavit regarding my own marriage, how it ended, you'll know that, at least from my perspective, I've had one of the worst marriages in all history. And as such, I ended up praying, to our Creator for divine discernment regarding women. I figured I must have had absolutely none in choosing my first wife, or it wouldn't have ended the way it did. And when I prayed for divine discernment, I was thinking that I was going to be given more of an insight into other people, and their character, less reliant upon what they say, and even necessarily what they're doing in the moment in front of you. And more about looking upon them as God, the Creator, sees them in their present condition, so that I could discern, not just based upon my own perceptions and even instinct, but more upon divine revelation, so I'd never again be basically abused or maltreated in the way I was. But what I got was, again, this goes so often to how many times I prayed and in my mind conceiving how I would think the Creator would answer me. In other words, there's all kinds of head shrinks out there that think people only think they're getting answers from God or the spirit realm and stuff, but it's basically something they were exposed to, or something that somebody else taught them, or this or that. And it's like, I'm saying hogwash. I'm saying these people don't know what they're talking about. And because the truth of the matter is our Creator has answered many of my prayers in wholly unexpected ways that I don't think anybody could have possibly conceived of. And I'm telling you about one of those ways, in just one of these prayers in this particular video, and that was when I prayed for divine discernment concerning, my ability to look into the character of women. And when I prayed for divine discernment, I got an entirely different answer than I expected. God basically took, my spirit and started showing me women primarily, but also men, all over the planet. Our commonalities were prevalent in all races, all ages. I mean, human beings are not that complex when it comes to just their basic desires and happiness. It really, of all races, of all nations, of all ages, they're not that different. Not really. In other words, this whole notion that, of looking for your one and only soulmate among billions of people is God's not that cruel. That basically God made us all so similar that if we all just would take a tiny effort in our relationships with Him in it as the glue that properly makes it work, the virtues of love, that come from God only, not just lust, not just desire, not just chemistry or attraction, pheromones or animalistic behavior. It goes far beyond that, but including God in your relationships, that, marriages would last, and the people would be very happy together, and it wouldn't be all about just trying to find that one and only soulmate. It's more like about God's made it so possible for so many different people to come together in marriage and still be happily married, that it's a wonder that there's such high divorce. But in these visions, in these revelations, the Lord showed me that the real causes why divorce is just so high. And there's this total, people joke about it. You've seen stand-up comedies about it. Battle between the sexes. It shouldn't exist, but it exists because of the basically rebellion against our Creator. Of both sexes. Men doing their own thing, women doing their own thing, and one of the trends of our era, of our generation upon this planet is, and I'm speaking to men mostly now, is that women, whether you want to believe it or not, all over, and especially in America, get together with their girlfriends and talk about training their man. And the number one method they use for training their man, and they laugh about this, is men in their dicks. Okay? I'm speaking bluntly and blatantly because somebody's got to do it. This is what the Lord showed me. That they get together with their girlfriends and laugh about it. That they basically train their man like a dog, and they use sex. They blackmail their man for sex to get them to do all kinds of things, and just manipulation, and they laugh about it with their girlfriends, think it's all funny. Men in their dicks. In other words, like among women, they think when they talk to their girlfriends that men are fucking stupid. And I'm speaking very blatantly and very coarsely and very crudely because I want to break through with truth. I want to get through all the lies, all the deceptions, all the crap, and say that yes, people can learn directly from the Creator, and what the Creator reveals is fundamental truth. Is the way things actually are in reality, that it doesn't have to be fitting into religious dogma and false piety and oh bless you my son and this and that it's just fundamental. What comes from God is fundamental truth, and that truth is what's necessary to right the wrongs, to make things, man, good again on planet Earth, to make things the way the Creator intends them to be, while everybody is rebelling and making themselves miserable in the process. And I'm telling you, men, that women, get together with their girlfriends, especially here in America, and laugh about training their men. That basically, among their female friends, they think men in general are stupid or mentally challenged. Okay? And the reason they think that is because they think that they can control any man through sex. Men in their dicks is their common phrase, and they laugh about it. So in marriage, men, now I'm speaking of women, men are thinking when they walk down that aisle, pledging to love you and only you for as long as you both shall live, till death do you part. I'm speaking in the natural realm, what's going through, the natural mind of the natural male. Is they're thinking, whether they want to admit it or not, whether men in general will come out and finally just be honest about it or not, they're thinking that the no sexos is off the table. They're thinking they're going to get some regular for the rest of their natural lives. The primary reason why they are skipping down that aisle with you, pledging undying love to you till death do you part, and faithfulness in marriage, is because fundamentally In their mind, they're thinking that they're going to get regular intimacy sex. Regular. Not having to jump through hoops, not having to be trained, not having an endless increasing honey-do list. And women are thinking just the opposite. They're thinking, that now that they've hook, lined, and sinkered this man, they've got basically a slave to conquer, to mold into their liking, and to do their bidding for as long as they both shall live. And it's like, no. What I'm getting at is the fundamental reason for divorce is, they talk about money and they talk about the power struggle and this and that. But the fundamental reason is rebellion against God. That's the fundamental reason. The fundamental reason is both sexes, both the male and the female, rebelling against God's instructions for life. In other words, in their own incarnate carnal flesh being selfish. Not loving one another, not recognizing that the reason why, the husband helps the wife and the wife should be helping the husband, the reason why that's a mutual thing is out of love. Not out of, a notion of sex, for the day, or sex for the moment, or sex. Which I'm getting back to that because fundamentally, that's really what's causing all the divorces. Is that there's this fundamental struggle between women to dominate men, and between men to dominate women, and that battle, that power struggle, and it's basically that sex is the blackmail tool, the fundamental tool, the underlying truly sexual repression is what's causing the vast majority of social dysfunction in the world, and even wars. Sexual repression. And I'm not saying that, that means anything goes and you start screwing animals and little children or just whatever. I'm saying that between what God designed for marriage, between male and female, between husband and wife, because of the carnal nature of women using sex as a tool to manipulate men to become their slave, and then the women, when that actually works for them, disrespecting the man because of it. When the poor guy's just like, damn, I got married thinking, I wouldn't have to be jumping through hoops, and now I'm jumping through more hoops than ever, so what happens to the man? He's like, well, heck, I can go get sex from somebody else, and divorce, adultery, and everything else ensues. In other words, he's thinking, well, I got married, man, thinking, all that was off the table. The no sexos, the blackmailing for sex was a completely, moot point. Now I'm saying that blatantly because there's not, between most men and women, between most married couples, before they actually walk down the aisle, a meeting of the minds. There is not an actual open, frank discussion about what each person, at least at that point in time in their journey of incarnation, is expecting out of marriage. I'm just telling you straight from divine revelation from God Almighty that, and I'm not saying that this is true for every man and for every woman, I'm just saying that this is true for the vast majority of all races, of all nations, of all men and all women on the planet, direct from the Creator, showing me how men and women really are and how men and women really think and what they're thinking, most men and women, when they walk down the aisles. Men, I'm telling you, fundamentally, whether they want to admit it or not, men are thinking that they are going to get regular sex for the rest of their natural life. That never again are they going to have to, impress another woman with, all kinds of, things that just don't even come natural to them. That women might say, oh, that's so romantic, A man's like, okay, man, it's my duty to, feed my children that I bring into this world. It's my duty, to make sure, as best I can, that I go out into the world and do my best to provide for my own, the hungry mouths to feed, and so on and so forth. And Their number one reward in their dog mind and their natural mind is sex. Regular sex from the woman that they said they would be faithful to till death do they part. And they see that one act of walking down that aisle as sufficient for every day for the rest of their natural lives to get that from her. I'm being very blatant about this because divorce is off the charts because this is not openly discussed about what's really in the mind of men and women, and the lack of the fact that there is not a meeting of the minds. There's not a true understanding and agreement when two persons are pledging those vows. It's not happening. I'm not saying nobody ever does it. I'm saying the vast majority do not have a meeting of the minds. In other words, you don't even have what makes for a good business relationship, let alone a marriage, when you're walking down the aisles vowing to one another for life. You're not having an open discussion about the things that really matter to you, the things that you, at least in your journey, at least at that point in time, want and are truly expecting, honestly expecting out of marriage. And I'm telling you point blank from the Creator that most men are expecting out of marriage sex. Regular sex. And not like tolerating sex. They are expecting regular intimate contact with that woman for as long as they both shall live. Until you're both, I suppose, so old, you know, that by then your intimacy goes beyond just sex. In other words, you spent so much time together that you can't imagine being apart, you know, and that you're perfectly and totally content and desiring to be together, you know, whether or not you're having sex. But I'm talking about, for most men, when they walk down that aisle, they are expecting for the rest of their natural lives sex. They are not expecting, you know, to have a honey-do list that grows, and unless they properly live up to an ever-increasing expectation from their wife of measuring up, you know, that they're not going to get any. They're not expecting that at all. And I'm telling you, when they get angry and when they get violent and when they get unfaithful, that it is because the battle of the sexes, women are using sex to manipulate men. And that is the answer for unhappily ever after. That is the answer for why there's wars. You want to have peace on earth. It starts with a stable family molecule. It starts with happy men, women, and children. And men, women, and children are not happy if they are not regularly hugged, regularly kissed, regularly loved, regular intimate contact between husband and wife. Now, I'm not saying multiple times per day, every day and stuff, but I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that during the honeymoon phase of the marriage either. But I am saying, point blank by divine revelation, because somebody's got to say it, that men, by and large, point blank, when they are pledging, vowing their marital vows in their natural mind, no sex is off the table unless you are dying, unless you're so sick, man, and so weak, truly, not pretending, oh, I've got a headache. Not making up some, excuse. Well, I'm too tired. From their perspective, he's too tired too. But still wants and needs intimacy. Without it, man, the marriage is doomed. You may as well put a nail in the coffin, because that's going to end your marriage. Now, it might come out arguing over money or arguing, over all kinds of other little things. But sex denied, man, sex. And I'm not talking about tolerating sex. I'm talking about true desirable sex for both the husband and the wife for each other. If that ever gets in any way, shape, or form, man, challenged for any reason, the marriage, man, is all but doomed. So you better, be open with one another about it. And women, stop trying to train men. If you really want to be a queen, If you really want to feel like a queen or an empress, you need to treat him like a king or an emperor.